Good evening, shalom. Welcome to this episode here of the Watchdog. Thank you for tuning into this news program with us. This is our first show of the new year, so happy belated new year to you all. This is, of course, the show that is habitually not on time, by which I mean completely skipping over weeks when we're supposed to have one on every week. At least I pay attention to my other show, right? But nonetheless, happy to be back here with you guys, at least for a little bit. Gonna have some pretty interesting, but also, as is the usual, not so fun, pretty depressing kind of news for you here today. Because that, I mean, what else kind of news is there, right? I mean, it is even news if it doesn't make you want to go punch something in the face. That's a joke. Not a very good one, but it's a joke. Nonetheless, got a few interesting stories here for you. There is one thing I do want to talk about briefly, because I'm not going to be reading any articles on it, and that is the Iran debacle, this whole thing that's going on with Iran. Not going to be talking about it because it appears to have actually been completely de-escalated just as fast as it escalated. There has been conflicting reports from Iran, some saying that this is not actually the end of retaliations, and others saying that they are backing down, although for the most part it does actually seem like the news sources saying that they're backing down seem to be the more legitimate ones, most definitely, and they definitely seem to be the more prominent ones. President Trump himself has actually said that they appear to be backing down. President Trump is announcing a new nuclear deal, right? He wants to start talking with the Iranians again in a new nuclear deal. And I personally think, though, I guess we're not 100% sure yet. We'll have to wait and see. But this kind of sounds like capitulation to the Iranian government, whether that's because of fear of the American media and American mob here, or if it's because of fear of Iran or Iran's allies or a World War III. That did seem like a capitulation, in my opinion. I don't think we should be talking to the Iranians in this manner at all. Hopefully we'll be able to get more news on that once we actually have more details as to what this new Iranian deal will actually, what it will entail, what exactly we're going to be agreeing to, what exactly we're going to be having them held to, what standard we're going to be having them held to, right? But I did not like that. I did not like hearing that. I did not like this entire situation because it's a little bit of a quagmire, right? And it's kind of a terrible one in the sense that what do you do if you're attacked by someone like China, like Iran, like Russia, right? You can't just back down and capitulate to them, but also at the same time, those guys have friends, and it is very possible that we could get in a World War kind of situation. And they're very sensitive situations because of that. I don't like seeing them. I don't like the harsh judgments that either side ends up making. I find myself actually sharing a lot of people's points on both sides because I tend to agree with both sides. I'm very anti-war, and yet at the same time, we can't be weak. That being said, though, I do think capitulating to Iran in the fact that, Donald Trump wants to actually have a new Iranian deal on the table is actually capitulating to Iran. So I do not like that in any way, shape, or form. I am glad to see things are de-escalated, but not de-escalated in that sense. They should be de-escalated completely and entirely on American terms. And part of those American terms should include telling Iran, you just don't have the right to have access to nuclear capabilities so long as we're stronger than you. Because quite frankly, we don't trust you. You can say you don't trust us as well. I do understand there was a little bit of precedent for that, considering our overthrow of the Shah of Iran and some of the other kind of negative, for lack of a better term, and I mean there could be quite a better term used there. Actually, it's a peaceful term, but negative consequences that have gone about in Iran because of American foreign policy. Get all that, but Iran is calling for the death of all infidels, as are all Islamic theocracy kind of countries. So there is a little bit of a difference and a pick your poison in that regard. But with that being said, it does appear that everything is going to be kind of slowing down. Now we're talking about impeachment again, so that is, kind of the sign that it's business as usual. I don't care about impeachment, so we're not going to comment on that here. Basically think it's not going to happen, and that'll be the end of that little conversation there. But yeah, I just wanted to give a few little thoughts here on Iran. And then we're going to move on to this disgusting little gem here from NBC News. So, for those of you who don't know, a very heartbreaking situation is occurring currently in the state of Texas. I know, believe it or not, it is actually the state of Texas. Well, it's surprising in the sense that we're having the issue. I guess it's not necessarily surprising in what the court ruled, but you'll get all the details once we read the article. Many of you may recall Charlie Gard and what happened to Charlie Gard, as well as Alfie Evans over there in Britain, where they had diseases that were basically causing them to be put on life support. It was very expensive and also experimental, the treatments that they were wanting to try. And the EU government basically decided that not only were the parents not allowed to keep the child and die with him, right, when they would take him off of life support, that he had to stay in the hospital and die, but also that they couldn't even actually send him anywhere else, not even within the Union, to try and get some of these experimental treatments, saying that it wasn't worth it. Donald Trump actually offered to pay for Charlie Gard's medical expenses himself, and of course Donald Trump definitely has the money, he's a multi-billionaire, right? But the European Union basically murdered Charlie Gard by saying no, for no reason, as far as I can see. I ended up covering it at the time. You can watch some of those old videos. I don't know if any of them are on YouTube. They might be on Facebook. But nonetheless, it seems like it was completely pointless. There didn't appear to be any rhyme or reason behind it, other than basically, we said he should die, and we are the gods of this domain, so therefore he will die, right? Well, something very similar is now going down in the state of Tejas, little Texas down there, that state that's supposed to be the conservative paradise. Well, apparently it is not the conservative Eden that people are proclaiming it to be. In fact, it has quite a bit of problems. One of those problems here is this hospital trying to do that same thing to a little girl here named Tinsley Lee. It does appear here as of this January 4th article that the hospital has ordered her to keep on, the hospital has been ordered to keep her on life support. I want to go ahead and double check this really quick to make sure that this is the most recent, because I didn't actually realize that this article was about 4 days old. Yeah, okay. So this is the most recent. All right, just wanted to make sure on that. So let's get into the article here with this. Hospital ordered to keep 11-month-old in Texas on life support. Appeals court says. Sorry, I didn't read the beginning there. Tinsley Lewis has a rare heart defect and has not left the hospital since birth. Doctors say she is in pain and will not get better, and they want to remove her from life support. This is in Fort Worth, Texas. A Texas appeals court on Friday agreed to delay a judge's ruling that would have allowed a hospital to end life-sustaining treatment for an 11-month-old girl who doctors say is in pain and will not get better. The Second Court of Appeals in Fort Worth ordered Cook's Children Medical Center to not remove Tinsley Lewis, from life support until it makes a final ruling on the case. The appeals court did not immediately schedule any hearings in the case, so this is essentially put off until further notice. On Thursday, a judge in Tarrant County denied a request by Tinsley's mother, Trinity Lewis, to issue an injunction that would have stopped the hospital from removing her daughter from life support, which was a horrible ruling, and I am very glad to see that, at least for the time being, it is not actually going to be, it's not going to have any value, right? Excuse me. Love coffee. Kind of do want some tea, though. Anyways, doctors at the Fort Worth Hospital had planned to remove Tinsley from life support November 10th after invoking Texas's 10-day rule, which can be employed when a family disagrees with doctors who say life-sustaining treatment should be stopped. The law stipulates that if the hospital's ethics committee agrees with doctors, treatment can be withdrawn after 10 days if a new provider can't be found to take the patient. Efforts to find another facility to take the girl have been unsuccessful. The hospital said it has reached out to more than 20 facilities. Kimberlyn Schwartz, a spokeswoman for Texas Right to Life, an anti-abortion group that's advocating for Tinsley, said her organization was grateful and relieved the appeals court had granted the emergency stay. She said the court's action would give her group more time to contact doctors and hospitals who could treat Tinsley. Quote, "This gives us so much hope for Tinsley," Schwartz said. "This is a prayer answered," end quote. And I completely agree. A spokeswoman for Cook's Children's Medical Center, my apologies, did not immediately return an email seeking comment Friday evening. Tinsley has been at Cook's Children's since her premature birth. The hospital said she has a rare heart defect and suffers from chronic lung disease and severe chronic high blood pressure. She hasn't come off a ventilator since going into respiratory arrest in early July and requires full respiratory and cardiac support. Lewis testified at a hearing last month, by which they mean Trinity Lewis, the mother, testified at a hearing last month that despite her daughter's sedation, she has a sense of the girl's likes and dislikes, describing her as sassy. She said that Tinsley likes getting her nails done, but doesn't like having her hair brushed. Which, whether or not that's true, of course, I don't really know. If there's any way for us to know, but the article decided it wanted to mention there. But I kind of like it. You know, you're humanizing the little girl as you definitely should be. So I kind of dig that. At any rate. Quote, I want to be the one to make the decision for her, end quote, Lewis said about removing her daughter from life support. At the hearing, Dr. J. Duncan, one of Tinsley's physicians, testified that the girl is in pain and that treatment was no longer benefiting her. The case has become a rallying point for Republicans in Texas. Sorry, on the right side, but you're still one of the thugs in government. I got to refer to you as what you should be referred to as. By the way, fun fact for those of you who don't know, Republicans and Democrats is not original to me. It's actually original to former governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura. In a phenomenal book that you should definitely read, by the way. The case has become a rallying point for Republicans in Texas. Earlier Friday, hold up one second. Let me restart that. The case has become a rallying point for Republicans in Texas. Earlier Friday, State Attorney General Ken Paxton, Governor Greg Abbott, and the state's Solicitor General sent a letter to the appeals court asking it to delay the judge's orders. Quote, I will continue to fight for Tinsley, and my office will continue to use all necessary resources to ensure that she will not be deprived of her right to live, end quote, Paxton said in a statement. So, we do have some positive, of course, in the fact that Tinsley Lewis, at least as it stands now, will remain on life support. She will remain alive. There are many out there who would argue that those who know best in this particular case would be the physicians. And whilst I certainly understand that the physician is going to be knowledgeable in this area, and I wouldn't deny that by any stretch of the imagination, I also think it is incredibly, incredibly dangerous to start making these sorts of pragmatic, purely logical decisions and making sure that the doctors are the only ones who can make these kinds of decisions, because it can very quickly lead us to eliminating other people, quote unquote undesirables, people who have a terminal cancer that the doctors believe will never get better, or people who are mentally handicapped and are not able to provide for themselves, or people who have some sort of a muscle disorder that causes them to need to be on machines to keep them alive for the rest of their entire lives, or etc., right? A whole bunch of other things like that. The basic fact of the matter is the state, whether it's the state of Texas or the state as in the nation of the United States or the nations of France, Britain, whatever it happens to be, whether it's the governments of international organizations or of international bodies, rather, right, like the United Nations or NATO or the UN or what have you, they do not have the right to take away an innocent person's life, right? They do not have that right. That is something that should be firmly established in our ethical code. If we're going to consider ourselves to be highly evolved, I think that's one of the immediate things we need to agree on, is that life is to be preserved. Life is the pinnacle of all virtues, right? There, as far as, I mean, you can't even, the pinnacle of all values, rather. You can't even possibly value anything on this entire planet without first having life, right? Your value for money, your value for family, your value for entertainment, your value for knowledge, your value for righteousness, your value for God, your value for your spouse, it doesn't matter. None of those values can possibly exist if you aren't alive to value them. Life is the pinnacle value. It is the only value that makes sense as a pinnacle value. And we do not have the right under any circumstances to take away innocent life. Under any circumstances. Okay? Now, I know some people are going to say, well, what about things like the death penalty? And what about things like war and all this other kind of stuff? Quite frankly, the death penalty is not meant to take innocent life, and therefore I think that's kind of a ridiculous thing to bring up. And while war is kind of the same thing, war is an interesting kind of concept. If you want to start talking about war philosophically speaking, I would actually make the argument war 100% of the time is evil. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a necessary evil. And necessary evils are a thing. In fact, I would say the death penalty is an evil as well. It's all just a necessary evil. But in those situations, you don't have, Tinsley Lee's not a soldier. Tinsley Lewis, excuse me. I've said Tinsley Lee a few times now. Tinsley Lewis is not a soldier. Tinsley Lewis is not a criminal. Tinsley Lewis is not some parasite or something like that, right? She's a human being who's alive, right? And has a right to live as a result. And we should be doing everything that's within our power to take care of this person. Because that's what it is. It's a person. She is a person. She is a name. She has consciousness, right? And I think this is something that it should just be accepted right out the gate. The fact that we're actually talking about this and questioning this, in my opinion, is just an example of really how sick and deranged we are as a culture. And I mean that sincerely. We are deranged as a culture, completely bonkers, completely insane. We have no morality. We're not immoral, we're amoral, right? We don't have morality at all. And this is, if I could get slightly religious for a minute, I think this is just what happens when you throw off any sort of, when you throw out, rather, any sort of an idea of God and his leadership, see Romans 1, but that's, the most I'll comment on that since this is supposed to be a secular program. Nonetheless, right, I think we just need to accept this as the based virtue. Now, the fact that we have to explain it, fine. All right, we've always said that you should be willing to debate anybody, including those people who it blows your mind that you have to debate, right? But that being said, it does blow my mind that we have to have this debate. I feel like this is something that we should inherently know. Let's have the discussion, but nonetheless, it's sad to me that we have to have the discussion. Let's go ahead and move on. I think that's about everything that I can say about this. Here's the big story for today, the one that I really wanted to get to, because it definitely grinds my gears, to quote Peter Griffin. That's such a funny show. At least it was in the back of the day. By the way, anybody who's seeing this, let me know in the comments section, just to randomly know who's actually watching this and who aren't. What do you like more, The Cleveland Show, Family Guy, or American Dad? Let me know in the comments section below. Just a little test to see who's actually watching this, or how many people are actually watching this all the way through. Nonetheless, so this is an article here from NZ Herald. I believe this is New Zealand Herald, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, the New Zealand Herald. And who is the writer of this article? It is Gavin Fernando. Okay. So, and again, the description, or in the description, rather, you will find links to all of these articles. So, this article points out something we've actually addressed before, though I think only once or twice, maybe. And that is what is actually going on in China. Although, to be fair, I guess we've addressed it in a sort of indirect way, because, we've talked about the Sino-Vatican agreement frequently. And in talking about the Sino-Vatican agreement, of course, we have made the connection between that and some of the religious persecutions that are actually going on in the nation of China as we speak. The religious persecutions are far worse than a lot of media outlets are actually letting you know, including myself in this particular regard. They're quite frankly, they're hellacious. They are being beaten, they are being tortured, they are being murdered, they are being raped. It is becoming a very, very terrible situation for the religious minorities of China. And the people who are the religious minorities of China at this point would be obviously anybody who is not part of these non-atheist, non-Buddhist groups who are inherently just accepting the state, right? The Taoist, Confucians, things like that. Things that have always been kind of pro-state or kind of malleable with pro-state beliefs. So they tend to be fine. But Muslims and Christians, and especially after the Sino-Vatican agreement, as well as Falun Gong, have been having a very, very rough time in China, mainly because there are certain values that they hold that they value more than any sort of loyalty to a nation or a man-made ideology such as communism or a political party such as the Chinese Communist Party. The Sino-Vatican agreement essentially legitimized Catholics who were willing to toe the line that the Chinese government was basically having it toe, right, with its new translated version of the Bible and its state-approved priests and things like that. And as a result, kind of makes it the only legitimate Abrahamic faith in the eyes of the Chinese government. And we've actually seen since this happened, as former cardinal at this point, Joseph Zen, actually predicted, heightened persecution against traditionalist Catholics as well as Protestant Catholics and Muslims, or Protestant Christians, sorry, and Muslims as a result of this Sino-Vatican agreement. Because essentially what it does is it kind of gives the Chinese government this sense of, well, we compromise. We're actually willing to meet you halfway. Why won't you meet us halfway, right? They have a document here now that says you can actually worship your particular God. You just have to do so under the guise of this body that we've accepted because they've agreed to certain rules, right? Those who are not going to be under that body and therefore not be under those rules that that body has accepted are going to be enemies of the state. And obviously this is something that is just getting worse and worse as time's going on. They have people in literal concentration camps at this point. Of course, they have had them in concentration camps for a long time. But they also have this program here of taking Muslim women, and I'm not entirely sure if it is happening with Christian women, but I imagine Christian women and Falun Gong women this is happening to as well. Taking them, right, and forcing them to have sex with non-Muslim, non-Christian, non-Falun Gong women as a means of reducing the population of monotheists and people who are not going to accept the Chinese communist status quo. If that sounds like something that is made up in a dystopian novel, I am sorry to say that it is not. It is, in fact, what is really happening in communist China today as we speak. Bear that in mind when dirtbags like James Harden and the NBA and Disney and all these other scum who live in our nation are going to actually support the Chinese government's censorship of human beings just for $1, right? Something as meaningless as a piece of cotton paper with some dead guy's face on it. It's ridiculous. But anyways, let's go ahead and go into this article. This is mass rape. China slammed over program that appoints men to sleep with Uyghur women. Or Uyghur. I think it's Uyghur is how you say that, actually. Nonetheless, Western coverage of one of China's worst human rights abuses, the mass detainment of over 1 million Muslim Uyghurs, has increased over the past year. Now, I do need to say there does tend to be a massive blank spot in American media, even the American media that reports on this, which is that they never actually link the Sino-Vatican agreement with the persecution that's going on. That's the first one. Number two, they never address the fact that these persecutions are happening to traditionalist Catholics and Protestant Christians and Orthodox Christians and all those other kinds of people as well. Whether that's because of an anti-Christian bias or a pro-Muslim bias, I'm not sure. And number three, they never address the fact that Falun Gong are also being persecuted. The only two news organizations I have seen do this are InfoWars. By do this, I mean report on the fact that it's happening to Christians as well, and the fact that it's happening to Falun Gong as well, are the Epoch Times and InfoWars. You could argue some of the different Christian news hosts for sure, but or Christian radio hosts rather, like James White and Michael Brown, because they've definitely talked about it. But I wouldn't consider them to be news sources necessarily as much as, and in fact, I would be considering them to be horrendously failing at their job if they did not mention those. And they're not, by the way. They talk about those. I'm just saying that those aren't news organizations the same way InfoWars and the Epoch Times are, right? But as far as people like CNN, as far as even the New Zealand Herald here, we've been seeing people at the Huffington Post constantly talk about things like this. We've been seeing people all over the place who are actually talking about this. And it's still the minority, but they are coming from all different sides of the political spectrum and all different sides of the planet and all that kind of stuff, right? And yet they always tend to have this blank spot as it pertains to Christian persecution and Falun Gong persecution in China. It's not just Uyghur Muslims. And quite frankly, it's not even just religious persecution either. It's persecution against those who don't toe the status quo in any way, shape, or form, whether that's in political ideology, whether that's in supporting Tibetan rights or Hong Kong's rights, whether that is supporting some form of a Kuomintang government or Taiwan, whether that is supporting the religious organizations here, but not actually holding those religious beliefs yourself, right? There's a lot of different people who are being persecuted by the Chinese government. It's not just Uyghur Muslims. And I'm not saying that to belittle the persecution that's going on to Uyghur Muslims by any stretch of the imagination. It would be kind of like if we were living during the 1940s, right? I want you to know that Germany's persecuting Jews, but we need to mention that they're persecuting gypsies and blacks and handicapped people and all that other kind of stuff also. Same applies to the modern day as it applies to China. There are a lot of other people being persecuted in China, not just the Muslim Uyghurs. Anyways. Satellite images revealed the government destroying scores of traditional burial grounds belonging to Uyghurs in northwestern, I think you pronounce that, Xinjiang. Drone footage revealed hundreds of blindfolded and shackled men being transferred to detention camps, and just last month, secret Chinese government documents revealed how the regime was instructed to deal with the ethnic minority. Now, the argument the Chinese government would make is that these camps are similar to the internment camps that you had the Japanese in the 1940s, or the camps that we would currently have Mexican migrants in. The reason I say that is because that's not a concentration camp. You may disagree with it, but it's not a concentration camp. And so that is their argument. Of course, that creates a completely different argument in and of itself, whether or not they're actually justified in doing this. But there is quite a bit of evidence to suggest that these are actually not just internment camps, but that they are indeed concentration camps. Let's go ahead and continue reading here. But lesser reported on is the disturbing policy implemented in the Northwest region, a forced living arrangement between Han Chinese men and Uyghur women that's been likened to mass rape. Let me say that one more time. A forced living arrangement between Han Chinese men, obviously Han Chinese men who are loyal to the Communist Party, and Uyghur women, who are, of course, Muslim, that's been likened to mass rape. And of course it's been likened to mass rape because that's exactly what it is mass rape. These women don't get any sort of a choice in the matter. They're just simply being forced to carry the seeds of these men. Many of them already being married. But of course, what's a little adultery when you're committing mass rape, right? The government claims it's designed to promote harmony between the different cultural groups. But activists tell a different story. Think about that. Imagine right now if Donald Trump decided, hey, I want to get a bunch of white American men to go sleep with Mexican women who have been detained in the camps where you're putting migrants, right? I want to have these white men go sleep with those Mexican women because that's going to make us sing Kumbaya and be so friendly with each other. Would you not think to yourself, you're disgusting, you're a dirtbag, somebody should remove you and then charge you? Put you in prison for this. This is horrible. In fact, potentially even execute because this is horrible. Well, that is exactly what this dirtbag Winnie Jinping is doing in China. And of course, his real name is actually Xi or Z or however you pronounce the XI. I like to call him Winnie because he is a very sensitive soul, he is, and likes to ban people and banned Winnie the Pooh entirely, actually, because he was compared to Winnie the Pooh. Because he's a coward and has absolutely no spine whatsoever. So we're going to continue to refer to him as Winnie Jinping. Hopefully that catches on. That'd be nice. But nonetheless, Winnie Jinping, the things that he is promoting here, if it was happening anywhere else, anywhere that was considered to be civilized, or anywhere that is white, because I'm sorry, but that is what liberals mean when they say civilized. It's not what me and the other conservatives mean when they say civilized. We acknowledge the fact that Japan is civilized. We acknowledge the fact that despite a barbaric legal code, Saudi Arabia is pretty civilized, that Turkey is civilized. On the other hand, it does seem like pretty much every liberal refers to virtually every non-white country as third world or uncivilized. But nonetheless, that's a completely different subject. If this were happening in one of these quote-unquote civilized nations, a Western nation, right? Oh my goodness, the amount of rabble that would be, happening here in the United States, in Britain, in France, in Italy, in Norway, etc. Everywhere, people would be talking about it. They'd be sleeping and dreaming about it, and they'd be waking up talking about it again at the dinner table before they talked about it at work and then went on the news where other people talked about it for a living. You know what I'm saying? That's the way it would be. You'd be constantly hearing about this. It would replace the impeachment thing, and we would just be constantly hearing, oh, look at this, look at this. In fact, it might actually be the next thing that would cause some sort of an impeachment, depending on if it happened here or not. And yet, Winnie Jinping doesn't get reported on at all. Why? Well, to the best of my knowledge, it's because a lot of people in the liberal media agree with the Chinese government and don't want to make it look bad. Much the same as they did with the Venezuelan government whenever it collapsed and then started opening fire on its own government, or on its own citizenry, rather. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and continue. Let's read, right? Maybe the activists are over-exaggerating. So let's go ahead. I mean, I don't know how they possibly could be in this particular situation, but let's go ahead and check it out. Mass rape, China's shocking pair-up program. They spell program with an E at the end and two M's, and I find it funny. Anyways. In November, various Western media outlets reported that Han Chinese men had been assigned to monitor the homes of Uyghur women whose husbands had been detained in prison camps. Let me say that again, whose husband had been detained in prison camps, right? So just for the record, it's not like they're taking unmarried women and saying, hey, if we had some sort of interracial marriages, that would create greater harmony. No, they're taking women who are already married and forcing them to live with these men, which is both adultery and rape. Just for the record. I know rape is definitely the more pressing matter in this. I'm just pointing out it is also adultery. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because it kind of, it makes more strong that rape point, right? Because it's not like it's these women committing adultery. It's not like they're willingly going and sleeping with these other men, behind their husbands' backs. They're being forced to live with these men while their husbands have been taken away and put in a concentration camp. That's what's going on, right? And if anybody ever wants to know, this is just us pairing up and having marriage so that we can have intercultural dialogue. No, it isn't. We can evidence that by the fact that these women are already married and are very devout Muslims, so therefore would know that they are definitely going to be committing some sort of a heinous sin if they are wanting to stay with you, right? No, that's not the case. This isn't something that is willing by any stretch of the imagination. It is forced. It is forced sexual intercourse with Uyghur women. That's what's going on. The reports came out after an anonymous Chinese official gave an interview with Radio Free Asia, confirming the program but denying there was anything sinister about it. As part of the Pair Up and Become Family program, Han Chinese men stay with and sleep in the same beds as Uyghur women. They stay with and sleep in the same beds as Uyghur women. But this is just, there's nothing sinister about it. It's just to pair up and become a family, as they say, to create greater cultural unity between these two groups. It's absolutely sickening. It's disgusting, quite frankly. According to the Chinese government, the program is designed to promote ethnic unity. But Rushan Abbas, a Uyghur activist whose family members have been detained in the I don't know how you actually pronounce that. I think it's Xinjiang. But if anybody has a correction on that, please let me know. Nonetheless, Xinjiang for more than a year, been in the Xinjiang camps for more than a year, it's nothing more than systemized rape. Part of the government's brutal ongoing crackdown against the country's ethnic minority. And again, whenever you're hearing this, bear in mind that this is also happening to Falun Gong. This is also happening to people in Tibet. This is also happening to Christians. It is not just happening to the Uyghurs. Even though it is also happening to the Uyghurs. This is a terrible situation, but it is affecting a lot of political, ethnic, and religious minorities in the country of China. Quote, this is mass rape, end quote, she told news.com.au. Quote, the government is offering money, housing, and jobs to Han people to come and marry Uyghur people. Neither the girls nor the families can reject such a marriage. Let me say that again. Neither the girls nor the families can reject such a marriage because they will be viewed by Chinese authorities as Islamic extremists for not wanting to marry atheist Han Chinese. They have no choice but to marry them. Let's say that one more time. Neither the girls nor the families can reject such a marriage because they will be viewed by Chinese authorities as Islamic extremists for not wanting to marry atheist Han Chinese. They have no choice but to marry them. How's about that for something to fight for with the pro-choice thing? Little dig at the moron in the, what was it, Golden Globes? Not even the important version. But anyways, the Han Chinese have been raping Uyghur women in the name of marriage for years. It took more than a year for the media to pick that up. While the Chinese government claims the program is about promoting unity, it also allows officials to, oh, by the way, end quote at the beginning of the sentence, sorry. While the Chinese government claims the program is about promoting unity, it also allows officials to keep a close eye on the Uyghurs who have spent decades living under increased surveillance. Human rights organizations have slammed the program, saying there is, quote, no evidence that families can refuse such visits, end quote, and describing it as deeply invasive forced assimilation practices. Last month, a Chinese official told Radio Free Asia the purpose of the program was, quote, to help the families with their ideology, bringing new ideas. They talk to them about life, during which time they develop feelings for one another, end quote. Or excuse me, not end quote, there is more here. Normally, one or two people sleep in one bed, and if the weather is cold, 3 people sleep together, he said, adding, it is now considered normal for females to sleep on the same platform with their paired male relatives, end quote. They claimed that the relatives and their female hosts sleep at least a meter apart at all times, and that the male Communist Party officials have never tried to take advantage of the women. Let me just say bluntly, if you believe that, you are beyond naive. You are just so insanely naive, or just ignorant and in denial, which is actually much more likely. There's absolutely no way, especially if you have 2 different, 3 different, 4 different, however many they're actually allowing in here, men actually sleep in this bed. There's absolutely no way they're respecting their privacy. Are you kidding me? That's so ridiculous. Miss Abbas says this is all lies. Of course. Quote, tons of pregnancies are coming up, end quote, she said. Quote, tons of forced abortions. This is mass rape disguised as marriage. Uyghur girls are forced to marry Han Chinese men with government gratifications, end quote. Isn't it interesting that they are down with forced abortions? Anyways, why is the Chinese government targeting Xinjiang? Hostility towards the Uyghur people. I keep saying Uyghur. Is it Uyghur or Uyghur? I don't actually know. I don't know how to pronounce a lot of the things in this country. So my apologies for that. I think it's Uyghur, so I'm going to go back to Uyghur. I don't know why I keep saying Uyghur, though. Either way. Hostility towards the Uyghur people stems back decades, but has increased sharply under China's current leader, Winnie Jinping. The crackdown of Xinjiang is partly fueled by Islamophobia. Mr. Winnie's government is increasingly cracking down on religious worship across the country, but Muslims have been especially targeted. I don't think that's accurate. To be fair, I think that is a little bit as a result of our own modern media's obsession with Islam that people are actually saying that. The evidence does not seem to suggest that that is the case. Again, Falun Gong and Christians are definitely being under heavy persecution. Although, to be fair, I guess I don't have any reports of this mass rape happening for those two. But just because they haven't been reported yet doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening. The crackdown is also economic. Mr. Winnie has a grand plan in motion to put his country at the economic and political center of the world. These ambitions are best summed up by the Belt and Road Initiative, a $1 trillion project that seeks to connect countries across continents on trade with China at its center. We have, of course, commented on that in the past. Geographically, Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang, is a crucial intersection point in the Belt part of the project. And may they give them hell. It also shares several, and by they I mean the Uyghurs. May the Uyghurs give the Chinese government hell. It also shares several international borders. Mongolia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Kyrgyzstan, I think is how you pronounce that. Yeah, Kyrgyzstan. I don't know. Never Kyrgyz, whatever. And Tajikistan. The last thing the Chinese government wants for such a crucial region in this plan is unrest or the loss of control. And that's where the intense security crackdown comes in. This explains why the crackdown escalated around 5 years ago, in line with the Belt and Road Initiative taking off. My family disappeared. This is a quote from Ms. Abbas. Ms. Abbas has long spoken out against the human rights abuses in Xinjiang, a move that has had disastrous consequences for her family in China. In September last year, she spoke about the conditions in the camps while seated on a panel hosted by a Washington think tank. 6 days later, her aunt and sister both disappeared at the same time, despite living 1,400 kilometers away from each other. Quote, my sister is a medical doctor. Their vocational training shouldn't apply to her. My aunt is a retired school teacher. Both of them went to Chinese school and speak fluent Chinese. They shouldn't have been targets, end quote, Ms. Abbas said. Even from her home in Virginia, which is, of course, in the United States, Ms. Abbas said she feels unsafe. Quote, there's always that concern, but we all live once and we all die someday. If I only think about my own safety and my own life, who will do the right thing and speak up about this atrocity? If my sister is sitting if my sister is sitting in a home cell block facing torture and abuse, I'm sure she is hoping that I will be doing something to save her and other millions of Uyghurs, so I have to keep doing what I am doing. And I completely agree and commend you, Mr. Boss, for what you are doing here. Mass extermination is next. Once again, concur. The camps in Xinjiang are given various names in the media. Some refer to them as mass internment camps, others call them surveillance facilities, re-education camps, or simply detention centers. But Mrs. Abbas repeatedly refers to them as concentration camps and warns if the Western world doesn't intervene, the mass detention will turn into mass murder. Quote, our children are unable to speak our language and understand our culture, she said. They are taken to state-run orphanages and are completely indoctrinated. I'm afraid this will turn into mass extermination. There's nothing better to describe what's happening in Xinjiang than concentration camps. What are we waiting for? Mass executions and gas chambers before we take action? What is it going to take to have the leaders of world communities, particularly Western democratic countries like Australia and New Zealand, to act? Executions? Is that what it is going to come down to? I mean, honestly, and I know I'm a cynic, but I don't even think that would get anybody to care as far as the United States. Now, you know, there is the question of what exactly is the action we should take. I don't necessarily know the answer to that question. I'll admit that, you know, foreign intervention is such a crazy subject, honestly. Like, you always want to be the idealist who says absolutely never do we get involved in foreign quagmires. But also, you know, it does kind of make you wonder, how can I not get involved in this situation? But I think bare minimum, we could embargo them and not trade with them. You know, make sure we're not giving them any sort of credence in the international playing field, right? We could support countries like Taiwan, and we could support Hong Kong, and we could support the Tibetan people, whether that be monetarily or with weapons. Although I don't necessarily know. You know, you could argue that even that's getting a little bit too involved. I definitely would bare minimum be supporting Taiwan and embargoing China, for sure. There's got to be something done. The basic fact of the matter is, in China, what's going on right now is mass detention of religious minorities. It is soon to be mass execution of religious minorities. We are seeing mass rape of religious minorities, and this is going to get very bad, and it's going to actually spread to more countries than just China, let me tell you. And this is why we need to continually take this back to that Sino-Vatican agreement. Essentially, what the Vatican did, which is the most powerful religious organization in the entire planet, what they did is they said, we are going to allow the most evil of evil governments completely dictate the religious thought of our particular faith, and therefore of all monotheistic faiths who are going to be, you know, lumped into the same category as us, for the preservation and pushing forward of our own, and by our, I mean the Vatican, political power, right? What is to stop the Vatican from doing the same thing with Saudi Arabia, or with Iran, or with Pakistan, or with Indonesia, or with the Philippines when they decide to persecute people, or with Russia when they decide to persecute people, or when Israel decides to persecute people? Because let me tell you what, yes, I am definitely a supporter of Israel. Yes, I am definitely a Zionist. No, I do not believe that the Zionists are going to take over the world or any of that bogus nonsense. But the Orthodox community in Israel is definitely growing more zealous and is persecuting more and more the Messianic Jews. That is a fact that's going on right now. Who is to stop the Vatican from signing something with the chief rabbinate there that basically allows all the Catholics to be good, but puts anybody who wants to be a Protestant or an Orthodox Christian or anybody else who's not going to be under this wing of the Catholic Church, you know, at the opposite end of a gun there? It's totally possible. In fact, it's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. The Vatican will be making these deals with Islamic governments, with atheistic communist governments, with the Jewish government in the sense of Israel, with some different Christian governments who are persecuting other Christians or other ethnic minorities like Muslims and things like that. And the only way to avoid this is going to be to put yourself under the watchful eye of the Vatican, because the Vatican is the people who are signing these deals that is making them the legitimate governments, right? We already have the first example, patient zero, if you will, in the nation of China, and we have seen the persecutions that have gotten worse and worse and worse since then. And of course, it does have a little bit to do with this Belt and Road Initiative as well. But we do need to take into account that this has gotten tremendously worse since 2018's Sino-Vatican Agreement was signed, just as Cardinal Joseph Zen said it would. And yeah, that's really all I got to say about that, because there's other things I want to be talking about, and I'm almost out of time here. So, let's move on. The Epoch Times, speaking of a news organization that I was talking about earlier, Jewish lawmakers call for state of emergency after Hanukkah stabbing in New York. This is a little bit old. December 30th is when this article came out, written by, let me see here. Who's the writer of this article? Come on. It's not saying. Maybe I just missed it. I don't know. Anyways, so in the state of New York, there has been Jewish leaders calling for a state of emergency to protect Jewish people, sending the National Guard out to Jewish neighborhoods and as personal security in Orthodox Jewish synagogues. This is as a result of a few different Islamic, Black Hebrew Israelite, and white supremacist attacks that have gained some serious notoriety, as well as the general increase in anti-Semitism in New York over the last, really, it's been kind of increasing for about 2 decades, but really exponentially in the last 5 years. This has been coming from numerous different religious groups, ethnic groups, racial groups, political groups, both left-wing, right-wing, doesn't really seem to matter too much. And you can kind of sympathize with why leaders are calling for this. That's not actually why I'm talking about this today. I'm actually talking about this to completely disagree with the Jewish leaders. I think this call for a state of emergency is a horrible, horrible idea that is basically begging the state of New York and potentially even the United States federal government to put the city of New York under a sort of police state surveillance. It will be used to violate human rights. It will be used to violate posse comitatus, the 4th through 6th Amendments, potentially the 1st and 2nd and 3rd, and maybe all of the amendments. It will definitely be used to violate posse comitatus. And it will, it's just a generally bad idea. But I'll get you some more details here in a second. Let's go ahead and read the article so you guys actually know what I'm talking about here. Jewish lawmakers call for state of emergency after Hanukkah stabbing in New York. Following the machete attack at a Hanukkah party last Saturday in Monsey, New York, 4 Orthodox Jewish lawmakers signed a joint letter demanding the governor to declare a state of emergency and deploy armed forces to counter anti-Semitic violence, right? And there you have that. That is the big problem there. Deploy armed forces to counter anti-Semitic violence. I'm sorry, it does not warrant that. It's not even close. It's not even close. And that you are begging on your hands and knees, please, government, persecute me, put me under some kind of a surveillance, violate my rights. That's what you're doing right now when you say, I want armed security to combat anti-Semitic violence. And not armed security that you're paying for or that you're hiring or anything like that, but armed security that is actually state endorsed. That is the opposite of a good thing. That is a terrible, horrible, bad, repugnant idea. And I certainly hope that the leaders who are calling for this are coming to their senses very soon, because it is not a good thing to put under military rule a city, right? It is a complete and total violation of your constitutional rights, which are given by God. And it will only spread if it's something that is being not only accepted by the populace, but begged for. In the December 29th letter to the New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, 4 Democrats, New York State Senator Simcha Felder, New York State Assemblyman Simcha Echtenstein, New York City Councilman Chaim Dush, how do you say that? I don't know. Doesn't matter. New York City Councilman Kalman Yeager wrote that in the past few days, Orthodox Jews in and around areas they represent have fallen victim to a rash of violence unseen in modern history, which for the United States in particular is true. I'll even grant that. I don't think it justifies what they're calling for. Quote, Orthodox Jews are regularly assaulted, menaced, stabbed, and murdered in increasing numbers. This has been appropriately described as a slow-rolling pogrom, reads the letter. Simply stated, it is no longer safe to identify Orthodox in the state, as Orthodox is what they meant, in the state of New York. We cannot shop, walk down a street, and send our children to school or even worship in peace, end quote. The answer to that is not a police state. It is not the military coming in and trying to enforce itself as some kind of police force on those who are deemed to be a threat to the Jewish community. That is not the answer. What is the answer? Maybe hiring some security at your synagogues. Maybe relaxing the gun laws so that you can actually purchase and carry a firearm on your person and therefore defend yourself if somebody were to attack you. Maybe some sort of activism as far as getting communities together or forming a Jewish defense league, right? I'm completely unopposed to the idea of a Jewish defense league in these areas. You do have a right to form a militia. It's right there in the Second Amendment. And quite frankly, if you're forming a militia whose sole intent is not gangs or anything like that, but is just actually going to be protection of the Jewish community, like the Jewish Defense League was, then by all means, I don't see any issue with that. Nor should anybody who has a sane and rationally thinking mind. The answer is not violation of your liberties and rights. And it's violations of your liberties and rights, New York Jews. It's not just violations of other people, a violation of the other people's rights around you. It is your rights as well, right? Just because you're the one who happened to be calling for the security force does not mean it will not turn on you. Far from it. Far from it, right? They will definitely turn on you just like that in an instant's notice. It's people like me who are saying, no, step back, do not ask for this kind of stuff. Do not push forward this kind of stuff. We're the ones who are going to be trying to protect you, right? Because this is exactly how you get people who are considered undesirables picked on in very violent ways by the sitting government. And to be frank, a lot of times that ends up being Orthodox Jews. Although the governor has already directed the state police to increase patrols in Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods across New York, the 4 officials asked for more security, calling for the National Guard also to be deployed to visibly patrol and protect Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods. For those of you who are unaware, posse comitatus is this idea that we should not have the military and the police be united. They should be separate from each other. You should not have military officials, whether that be the actual military or militias, enforcing law and protecting citizenry. What these lawmakers are calling for is throw that away, military police all the way down, because some people are being picked on, and it happens to be pretty aggressive and violent, which, again, I agree it happens to be aggressive and violent. It's something that we should do something about. We should be concerned. This is not the something we should do about it. This is not the something we should do about it. And by the way, it is no surprise that it is the dirtbags who actually are running for political office who are calling for this, right? Because they know it will increase their power. The fact that they happen to be ethnically Jewish is irrelevant. They want to increase their own personal power. That's what this is about. Do not be deceived, Orthodox or unorthodox for that matter, Jewish community, nor Gentile communities for that matter. Do not be deceived. This is a call to violate your liberties, to violate posse comitatus, in fact, throw it out the window, and to eventually eliminate all constitutional rights in your city and possibly even in your entire state and possibly even this entire country in the name of security. You don't want a military state. You don't want martial law. You don't want a police state. Believe me, believe your own ancestors, because that's what got them slaughtered en masse. And you know what? To be fair, a lot of other people's ancestors too. Although the governor, we actually already read that. They also asked him to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate and prosecute current and future anti-Semitic hate crime cases. Also, not a good thing in any way, shape, or form. We do not need special prosecutors for crimes. The fact of the matter is, murder is a crime. Terrorism is a crime. Attacking people for any sort of reason, attempted murder, assault, right? Those are crimes. You don't need to, this is actually a greater crime because you happen to be Jewish, right? And this person attacks you because you weren't Jewish. That's ridiculous. The idea that any sort of violent attack is anything other than hatred is kind of preposterous, honestly. Calling for these kinds of laws, as I keep saying, does nothing more than violate not only the liberties of those around you, but your own liberties as well. This morning, New York Senator Felder, Assemblyman Einstein, Councilman Chaim, I think Douche is how you say that. I have no idea. I'm not good at pronouncing anything that is in English, to be quite frank. And I being Kalman Yeager, sent this letter to New York Governor Cuomo. We're asking for the state police and New York National Guard to be deployed to our neighborhoods and for a special prosecutor to prosecute anti-Semitic violence. This letter comes a day after 5 people were stabbed during a Hanukkah celebration at a rabbi's home in Muncie on Saturday night. The alleged machete-wielding attacker, 37-year-old Grafton Thomas, was charged with 5 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of burglary. A day before the Saturday night stabbing, a woman was arrested after she allegedly punched and slapped 3 Jewish women in Brooklyn and told officers it was because they're Jews. The suspect, 30-year-old Tiffany Harris, was charged with attempted assault and released without bail. Excuse me. Earlier this month, 2 gunmen opened fire at a kosher supermarket in Jersey City of the neighboring state of New Jersey. A 4-hour standoff and gun battle resulted in the deaths of both attackers and a police officer, and 3 people who had been inside the supermarket. And all that is true. And I definitely want to throw out my sympathies, my thoughts, my prayers, and also call people to action when it comes to defending the Jewish communities here, because there is a very large rise in anti-Semitism. I don't want to sit here and pretend there isn't. Right? That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is the solution is not to have special prosecutors to give people who have attacked Jews some sort of a special demeaning title, nor is the answer to put the military in charge of what is and is not criminal and to have them be the ones arresting criminals from protecting the citizenry. That is not a good thing by any stretch of the imagination. It is an evil thing. It is a thing that has caused millions upon millions, potentially billions, right, if you were to count all of world history, to die. That's exactly what that does. So you do not want that. Please, 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 please turn away from that kind of thinking, because it is not only, like I said, it's not only the kind of thinking that will get those around you killed, but it is the kind of thinking that will get you killed. It's not a good thing at all. We do not want, some armed United States Army or New York State militia patrolling our neighborhoods. We do not want violation of posse comitatus. These are not good things, right? Got a little bit more I want to talk about. We're about 3 minutes before we get to the hour, so we'll go a little bit over an hour here, but nonetheless, BBC News here, October 22nd, 2019. Look at this trash. Warwickshire relationship lessons are too sex-focused, this article says. A probe into relationships lessons that teach primary-age children about aspects of sexual development, including masturbation, has seen a council webpage taken down. You heard that correctly. An MP told the Commons parts of Warwickshire County Council's All About Me program that An MP told the Commons parts of Warwickshire County's All About Me program were not age appropriate. From 2020, all primary schools were statutorily required to deliver relationship education. All primary schools are statutorily required to deliver relationship education, and this is in Warwickshire County in Britain. The authority said it was considering comments and reviewing the lessons. It said it took down the All About Me webpage as part of its process. Rugby Conservative MP Mark Posse cited parents' concerns in Parliament last week. The council said the move was in response to wider feedback. While the council has restricted public access to the program's content, details remain on individual school websites, including Shrubland Street Primary, one of 83 county schools where All About Me is taught, according to the council. The site says the program is tailored to age groups from reception to year 6, and talks about, reception to year 6 years old. They're talking about them with things like masturbation in relationships to 6-year-olds. Literally to 6-year-olds. This is not InfoWars conspiracy theory stuff, even though you shouldn't think that InfoWars is conspiracy stuff at this point, considering the fact that everything they talk about is plastered everywhere on your mainstream media. No. This is, according to BBC, people who even you guys respect. By you guys, I mean those who don't traditionally watch the show, but, those who, we need to have authoritative news sources and all that. They are saying that there is 6-year-olds being taught about masturbation. That's what's going on. Not making this up. Say the world's not run by a bunch of pedophiles. And talks about personal relationships, emotions, gender stereotypes, and bodies. It increases focus on various aspects as children mature, all the way to 6 years old. Lessons on bodies share the common theme that they belong to the individual, and any contact that does not feel safe should be reported. As part of the teaching, Year 4 pupils, which is aged 8 and 9, consider when it is appropriate to touch themselves, including self-stimulation. Hang on one second. Let's just read that one more time, just in case you thought that there's absolutely no way you're hearing this correctly. As part of the teaching, Year 4 pupils, aged 8 and 9. What are their ages? 8 and 9. Consider when it is appropriate to touch themselves, including self-stimulation. Ladies and gentlemen, they are going in these schools teaching children how to masturbate. 8-year-old, 9-year-old children how to masturbate. That is what's going on in Warwickshire County right now. Not according to some crazy conspiracy theorist from the underground. According to BBC News and the council themselves. The Warwickshire County Council themselves. This is horrible, pedophilic, disgusting nonsense. I honestly would not be surprised if we saw Great Britain washed under the ocean in the coming years for this kind of filth. It's disgusting. This is some of the most sickening trash I've ever had the misfortune of reading to you people. It's literally sickening. Honestly, it's the kind of thing that makes you want to, find the people who thought this was a good idea and pummel them repeatedly with bricks until their brains ooze out like a slushie. You know what I'm saying? In a styrofoam cup that's just been crushed. Now, of course, that's not something we should do. But if that's how you feel, you're definitely justified in feeling that way. Let me be perfectly clear. This is disgusting. Absolutely horrible. But of course, what's morality when you don't have any concept of God? That's a different subject for a different time, but nonetheless, I just think it's something that needs to be noted, okay? For Year 5, lessons add wet dreams, erections, and menstruations to the topic. What would Year 5 be? 9 and 10-year-olds! 9 and 10! Of course, they've already been taught about masturbation, so I guess it doesn't really matter too much. Shrubland Street and others have been approached to see whether parents have objected. Further to relationship education in primaries and sex education will become compulsory in secondary schools from 2020. But Mr. Posse said the line between them was being blurred. He said he has been contacted by parents, quote, I have been shown the parent handout for the All About Me program, and it appears that some of the content goes beyond the necessary relationship education and into sex education, which is inappropriate for young children, end quote, he issued in a statement. He's very nice about the way he puts this. There's a picture of the All About Me guide here for you. So go ahead and check this out, right? There that is for you. So now you know all about some of the amazing changes that will take place during puberty. But remember, puberty isn't a race or a competition. It's important to be supportive of one another. It is okay to have questions or worries about puberty, and you can talk about anything that is on your mind with me or with other trusted grown-ups. Who are they talking to this about with? Or who are they talking to this? Excuse me. I can't talk. Who are they talking about this with? 8 to 10-year-old children. But, who cares about that, right? Children will explore what privacy means to them and others. Children will review their understanding of the rules surrounding private parts and how these might change as they get older and their bodies develop. Children will consider the rules when it is appropriate to be naked or semi-naked and when it is appropriate to touch themselves, including self-stimulation. What does it say? Part of the All About Me lesson guide for Year 4 pupils on Shepherd Street's primary school website. This is straight from the source. This is what they're saying, that they are going to be teaching 8 to 9-year-olds about touching themselves. That is what's going on. This is liberalism. This is this anti-God filth that has been pushed into the Western world by this secular humanist scum that has taken over our education and government system. Okay? This right here, pedophilic trash. Trash. Disgusting. There's absolutely nothing that justifies this sort of filth. And it's only going to continue to get worse. They continue to sexualize children over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Whether it's sexualizing them in cartoons, or sexualizing them in sitcoms, or sexualizing them by having transgenders dance at strip clubs in front of grown-ass men. This is what they do. They're sick. Not everyone agrees with Mr. Posse's assessment. That's probably because they're evil. A council spokesperson said, quote, "These resources are fully researched, evidence-based, and in line with the Department for Education guidelines." Yeah, and you know what? And I'm sure every single execution or re-education of any sort of Jewish or non-Jewish prisoners during Nazi Germany was right there in line with their Department of Education as well. Good on you. A bunch of idiots in a room decided they were doing the right thing. These resources are fully... I already read that. The council considers all comments carefully, and so we will be reviewing this content. The authority said in addition to the 83 schools already engaged in the project, 41 more had signed up for All About Me training. I just need to ask Britain, at what point is it too much? At what point is it too much? Apparently banning your firearms wasn't too much. Apparently arresting Mark Meechan, Count Dankula. I was about to call him Mark Dankula. Arresting Mark Meechan and finding him for saying something as stupid as, oh, gas the Jews to a dog, right? Apparently that wasn't enough. Apparently license for bleach wasn't enough. Apparently banning knives wasn't enough. Apparently removing cars from certain areas and neighborhoods in London, that's not enough. Apparently getting a license for your television isn't enough, and allowing your women to be raped and your young girls to be raped by scores and scores of Islamic grooming games, apparently that's not enough. Apparently the murder of Alfie Evans and Charlie Gard, that's not enough. Apparently not going forward with Brexit, that's not enough. What exactly, Britain, is enough for you? Tell me what it is. I'm interested. Is there a line? I don't think there is. I think the British people are just going to continue to bend over and let themselves be raped continuously by this disgusting and Marxist government that they have control over, that has control over them. Because quite frankly, they're a bunch of cowards at this point. And let me tell you what, that's coming to the United States. Because most of the United States is a bunch of cowards too. And there's plenty of British people who aren't cowards. Let me stress that, right? Mark Meechan is not a coward. Milo Yiannopoulos is not a coward. Paul Joseph Watson is not a coward. UKIP is not cowardly. There are tons of people who want to fight for their nation, but it's gone at this point. Y'all have decided you do not have a limit. And we've already seen what happens to other nations who decided they don't have a limit, right? Old school Rome, Sweden, etc., Greece, etc., right? It's going to happen to Britain. And mark my words, without some serious repentance and reflection on our own political ideologies as well, it is going to happen in the United States. Absolutely guaranteed. Absolutely guaranteed. One more thing to talk about here, and then we have a joke article, and then we're done. Infuriating. Anyways, this is from Gabriel Keane. New York UN office recruits paramilitary troops for disarmament and reintegration of U.S. civilians from InfoWars. Job requires experience in disarmament affairs, political analysis, or in national military or paramilitary service. The United Nations is now accepting job applications in New York City, New York for disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration officers to contribute to security and stability in post-conflict environments. The job listing was posted to the UN Careers homepage on December 26th and notes that, quote, female candidates are strongly encouraged to apply for this position because the United Nations Secretariat is committed to achieving 50-50 gender balance in its staff, end quote. Apparently that's important for some reason. UNDDR forces operate under the Intergovernmental Organization's Department of Peace Operations to assist the member states, including the United States, in a boots-on-the-ground capacity. The job listing describes the UN's core values as integrity, professionalism, and respect for diversity. Applicants eager to conduct DDR field missions are required to have, quote, 7 years of relevant experience in disarmament affairs, political analysis, or in national military or paramilitary service, and an advanced university degree, master's degree, or equivalent in disarmament affairs, military studies, political affairs, economics, international relations, or a related field. End quote. The UN describes the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration protocol as, quote, a complex process with political, military, security, humanitarian, and socioeconomic dimensions, end quote. Let's go ahead and go back up here, sorry. Key components of DDR as defined by the UN include disarming the civilian population and, quote, the development of responsible arms management programs, end quote, and the implementation of mass detainment camps. You heard that right, the implementation of mass detainment camps. Disarmament is the collection, documentation, control, and disposal of small arms, ammunition, explosives, and light and heavy weapons from combatants, and often also of the civilian population. Disarmament also includes the development of responsible arms management programs. Demobilization is the formal and controlled discharge of active combatants from armed forces or other armed groups. This first stage of demobilization may extend from the processing of individual combatants in temporary centers to the massing of troops in camps designated for this purpose, containment sites, encampments, assembly areas, or barracks. The second stage of demobilization encompasses the support package provided to the demobilized, which is called reinsertion. Reinsertion is the assistance offered to ex-combatants during demobilization but prior to the longer-term process of reintegration. Reinsertion is a form of transitional assistance to help cover the basic needs of ex-combatants and their families and can include transitional safety allowances, food, clothes, shelter, medical services, short-term education, training, employment, and tools. While reintegration is a long-term, continuous social and economic process of development, reinsertion, is a short-term material and or financial assistance to meet immediate needs and can last up to 1 year. Reintegration is the process by which ex-combatants acquire civilian status and gain sustainable employment and income. Reintegration is essentially a social and economic process with an open frame primarily taking place in communities of the local level. It is part of the general development of a country and a national responsibility and often necessitates long-term external assistance. The UN website notes that, quote, it is important to break out it is important to break outside of the traditional view of DDR participants as only being adult males carrying weapons, and remember that DDR participants and beneficiaries may fit all types of profiles, including female ex-combatants and women associated with armed forces and groups, children, youth, the elderly, and persons with living disabilities, end quote. Let me say that one more time, just in case you thought that that was ridiculous and that your ears are deceiving you. It is important, this is a quote from the UN website, it is important to break outside of the traditional view of DDR participants as only being males carrying weapons. And remember that DDR participants and beneficiaries may fit all types of profiles, including female ex-combatants and women associated with armed forces and groups, children, youth, and the elderly, and persons living with disabilities, end quote. UN hopefuls hoping to work in New York and contribute to security and stability in post-conflict environments can submit their application to become DDR officers December 2019 through February of 2020. So, I mean, it almost kind of seems surreal. But, of course, it's something that's been going on for a long period of time. My question is how long before this international military force is turned against the Western world? Because it will happen. I think it will actually happen to the United States first, personally. Maybe there'll be a one test run before that goes after the United States. But the United States is the one not on board with everybody else's immigration plans, everybody else's climate plans, everybody else's religious plans, everybody else's global governance plans and trade plans, and etc. The disarmament, right, all this other kind of stuff. And of course, how helpful would it be to use this force against Americans if it was primarily Americans who believed in your cause who made up the force? Or at least a significant number of the force was Americans. That's not the case so far, at least to the best of my knowledge. But of course, that is something that we could potentially see in the future. We are now seeing them, this DDR, try to, get more and more people on their side and, create a larger force for the disarmament and re-education and reintegration of these parties who they deem to be threats. I just ask, how long before this is used against Americans? And especially when you have incredibly volatile areas of the country like Virginia and Oregon ready to pop off virtually at any moment in time. Any moment in time, there's going to be some sort of violence happening in Virginia, some sort of violence happening in Oregon. There's people calling for, as we already saw in this particular video, military security in the city of New York. So how long really is it going to take, is my question. And I leave that to you, because I'm running out of time. Really, I'm already out of time, because I'm only supposed to be doing this an hour. But there's one more thing I just briefly want to read. I'll have the link in the description, but it's hilarious. And basically everything we talked about today was crap and incredibly depressing. So I want you guys to hear this hilariousness. Donald Trump's reign is hindering alien disclosure, says extraterrestrial researcher. I love it. I love this country. It's just amazing how stupid you're legally allowed to be in this country. Bassett claims that the U.S. Navy's admission of unidentified aerial phenomenon could be an indication that alien disclosure is near. This is real. I'm not kidding. International Business Times. The writer of this article is Nirmal Narayanan. I am not joking. I'm not going to read it to you. I'll put it in the link in the description below, and you can read it for yourself. Or maybe you can get a little pause here on the screen to read a little bit of it. But yeah, this is real. Oh my goodness. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And of course, they don't even get their facts right. Donald Trump would not have won the 2017 presidential election, which of course is not when the election happened. It was 2016, but whatever. I just thought you guys should know that because this is a real news article and it's absolutely hysterical. I don't know what side of the political spectrum these people are on. I just thought it was hilarious. They appear to be left-wing. Obviously, why else would you think it's Donald Trump's fault? But nonetheless, thanks you guys for watching. Shalom. Enjoy, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a depressing thing, so there's not very much of a happy note to end on. But at least you now know that we're safe from aliens because Donald Trump is president, I guess. Anyways, links to all of the articles below. If you liked this, please do like and share. Leave any questions, comments, criticisms, or concerns below. And subscribe here to the Synagogue if you are interested in this show, our other show, or both. Our other show is Unapologetics. It is religious apologetics, Christian apologetics to be particular. This obviously has to deal with politics and news, so not apologetics, arguments, and things like that. But either way, we have both of them, and we certainly do appreciate views on any of them. Links to all of our social media will be in the description as well. We have the Synagogue on BitChute, the Synagogue on Minds, Terrestrial Earthbird on Twitter, Cynic Thought on Instagram, ACP Official on Gab, and the American Civic Party on Facebook. So please do check out all of those social media profiles. We do greatly appreciate it. Hopefully we'll be back for you guys next Wednesday. I'm, terrible at that, but nonetheless, thank you guys for watching. Enjoy. And in the face of Armageddon, which we are getting closer and closer to, don't compromise. Please don't compromise.